Hello! Welcome back. That was very loud on the capture. Alright. Welcome to our first episode of our podcast. Yay! Claps. Woo! Yay! Thank you. We're okay. End of podcast.
Big crowd here.
Alright, so I am your host. My name is Sam, and today we're actually going to be discussing Sunday in the Park with George, a Stephen Sondheim musical, book by James Lapine. I'm a musical theater major, so I enjoy the musical stuff. I enjoy music, I enjoy acting. I did tech a lot in high school, and that's my bit. Turn it over to our buddy Chris over here.
Hi, I'm Chris. I am a brand new freshman, college student. Great times.
Freshman!
Yeah, make fun of me all you want, but here I am. I have quite a bit of theater experience from high school time, tech and acting, and I'm planning on doing a theater major, so
Right.
not necessarily musical theater, but
Theater.
I have experience.
Right.
Hi, I'm Ben. I am a senior theater major. I've been doing a lot of theater since high school through college, but I really don't know anything about music, so this is going to be an interesting sort of perspective for the musical podcast because I don't know music terminology. The last musical thing I did was I played the tuba in like 4th grade, so that's me. But I've done about 50-50 cast and tech. And I'm also an English major as well. Like I'm double majoring, so I can talk about like plot and things.
Awesome.
Sup, I'm Kellyanne. I'm a musical theater major,
Sup?
and I got into
Sup, bro?
theater. I got into theater and musical theater because my speech pathologist said that I should work on public speaking, and now I don't have a speech impediment anymore, and it's all thanks to theater.
Except for you being a little sick today.
I am very sick today.
I had no idea you had a speech impediment at any time.
Yeah, I went to speech therapy for 4 years when I was a kid.
What was the speech impediment, if you don't mind me asking?
I have a stutter.
Really? I never in my life would have guessed it. All right.
Theater helps.
Theater helps. Theater helps.
Theater helps. That's
That's the lesson.
that's
for
the motto of this.
All right, that's a wrap. All right. So we're gonna run through our quick overall impressions of Sunday.
Oh, first, do we want to talk about our experience with the show itself?
We can as we go along. I think.
Okay,
I think that'd be all right. So overall, we're gonna go overall impressions of the show. I thoroughly enjoy the music. Being a huge Stephen Sondheim fan, I really do enjoy the music. I really like a lot of the moments that are in this show in particular, especially with George being by himself. But my overall impression when I first heard it was a Sondheim show and that it won a Pulitzer, it was kind of like, wow, that must be a pretty good show. And then we did it over at Creighton University my freshman year, and that it was like we did it and it was great. It was phenomenal. Chris.
I have zero experience with this show in person, and just in reviewing it over this little bit of time, I am left with a positive impression of it. Definitely lyrically, musically, it's Stephen Sondheim all the way through, and I am a personal fan of Stephen Sondheim's work, and the music itself is very great, and I like how it's incorporated into little bits of character moments. You'll see a lot of the score reflect different actions that each of the characters have. But the overall show and the structure of it definitely gets downhill sloping once you finish through Act 1. So yeah, that was a clap.
Kelly and Chris just high-fived.
So definitely Act 1 is super strong. Great Sondheim work. And I'd say the music is still great in Act 2, but a lot of the story decisions a little lacking.
We'll get to that with the script and writing part.
So so I was part of the same show Sam was part of. I did crew on that one actually. I was on Fly Rail for that show.
So we have somebody from both the cast as well as the crew that have done that show.
Right, and so I really enjoyed it. I don't know, again, like I said, I don't know a ton about music, but the music to me was beautiful, and I think part of it comes down to the fact that I worked with it so closely, and I think it's a show for me that I don't know if I would have appreciated on one watch, but because I saw it like 8 times or something like that, I really fell in love with it by the end of it, and I think I got a lot more out of it because I saw it over and over and over and over again.
Right. Next.
I have seen the production that Sam and Ben are talking about. It was at our university. I was not in it. I was really busy with school at that time, but I did see it, and I did not like it at all.
Rude. How dare you?
I thought the plot
All
was
get her
really
out.
boring,
You're fired.
but we'll talk about that more later.
We'll talk about that with the plot.
But Stephen Sondheim is amazing. I just didn't like the story.
All right, so now we're gonna move on to the script writing, the character development, and then the plots. Things we did like, things we didn't like.
By the way, just real quick, what else has Sondheim done? Like, don't shoot me, musical theater people. I don't know.
Many.
He
Sweeney
wrote.
Todd.
Like, what ones would I know?
Sweeney Todd.
Never seen it.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Sweeney Todd's amazing.
Like, I know it's a musical. I just have never seen it.
It's a musical.
West Side Story.
Okay, then
Yeah.
He wrote
that's-
the lyrics for West Side Story.
that's what I know.
Leonard Bernstein did the music, but that was Stephen Sondheim's first.
It's probably
gig.
the only one I'll know. I pretty much only know musicals I've done or what they made us watch in like grade school.
Right.
So,
I'd say those are the big
It's okay.
two, though, right?
Yeah, Sweeney,
Todd,
but
yeah.
you could say like Into the Woods since it.
Into the
Oh,
yeah,
I have
yeah.
seen Into the Woods.
That's a Sondheim show.
You
Okay.
saw the show or the movie?
I saw the show. And actually, can I say that then? Because I know we're gonna talk. Because we've talked a little bit before the podcast. I know one of the biggest problems we all have with it is the second act of Sunday. And can I just say, like, that was my problem with Into the Woods too. Was the second act?
It got very
Is that-
convoluted.
Is that like a theme with Sondheim?
Definitely
Or is
not.
that- No.
Sweeney Todd is
Definitely
a very strong act two.
Okay.
And then West Side
Side
Story
Story
has a strong
two.
act two, I
Fair
guess,
enough.
if you want to count that. And then Assassins is another show that he did. He
It's
did all of
funny.
that.
It's, a funny
It's
show.
real funny, but it's also really dark.
Good.
That's
Anyway.
why it's
The best
funny.
kind.
Anyway.
That's why-
But so,
But
script.
Script.
So the script section. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Segue.
derail the conversation there.
We're talking about Sunday.
If no one else wants to start, I've got a couple of notes.
Sure, go for it.
Script wise. So for one thing, I really, really enjoyed the first act writing overall. I thought that most of the lines, spoken lines specifically, were fairly strong. The character interaction writing was good. The music is woven really well into that. I'll talk more about that when we get to the music section in a little bit. But I liked the overall theme, the relationship between art and the artist and sort of everyone else, and how that is reflected, playing with art and trying to push boundaries with art. I really thought it did a good job of trying to get that across. The problem is, and I mentioned this already, but the second act, I feel like it falls off a little bit, or a lot. It confuses the issue, I think, a lot in the second act, and while it closes strong, it kind of has this weird part in the middle where it just gets kind of muddled. And also, overall, the show can be a little bit slow, especially on a first viewing. Because if you're not there to experience, or you're not in the right mindset to experience what it's trying to give you, I think it has a hard time drawing you into that mindset and, like, forcing you to experience what it wants you to experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. It's a long show. Chris?
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kelly.
I
You've
would
been
say
holding that in for a while. haven't you?
I would say moment to moment, the script is very sharp and obviously like it ties a bit in lyrically, but you get a real sense of who all the characters are. My main gripe with the script is that the characters don't necessarily progress over time. We just learn more and more about each of the characters, and they're very believable in the way they're fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
But although like the start of Act 2, it's very jumbled, but I don't really find a ton of character development throughout.
Right.
Well, that's something that I saw when I was doing the show. I looked at all the characters and was like, there's really not a lot of character development, like you said.
Right.
But the biggest jump was in the very last little bit of Act 2 when Dot appears to the new George,
Yeah.
George Sorrell's grandson, and is like, "Are you working on something new?" And he's like, "No." And they have this "we should have belonged together" part,
Yeah.
and it's his realizing that he can create new things, and that's a big character shift. But I do agree. Overall, there's really not a lot.
I like that though, and I'll defend the point because the reason I think that there's no character progression overall, first of all, George is the only one who really is supposed to have any kind of arc, and I think the reason for that is it presents the whole show through the frame of the painting "Sunday on the Island of Le Grand Jatte" by the actual real life painter George Seurat, and so all of the characters except for George are characters in that painting. They're people in that painting. You see the woman in the very front, that's Dot. The guy right next to her is Jules. The guy sitting down with the dog is the boatman from the show. All these different characters. And so they're supposed to be static. They are literally paintings. And the song It's Hot Up Here is sort of a, I guess, like direct statement of that in a lot of ways, because they talk about how that nothing ever changes for them, and so to me that was actually part of the brilliance of the writing, in my opinion, because of the literal fact that they are people in a painting. They don't move. We're not Harry Potter. They don't get to run around.
Yes,
so.
yeah. They can't move in this painting.
Right. They are static. They are literally a static image.
Mm-hmm. I will say there's a lot of individual lines in here that carry a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And in particular, I really like the very first couple lines and then the very last line. And it's what George says. He says, "White, a blank page or canvas. The challenge, bring order to the whole through design, composition, balance, light, and harmony." And then, of course, Sondheim's music comes up.
That's white with an HW, by the way.
White,
Yes.
as our professor would say. And then the very last line of the show is when George is bawling his eyes out because he's feeling all these emotions from the art that his grandfather did. And then he reads in Dot's journal, "White, a blank page or canvas, his favorite, so many possibilities." And then you just hear, bling.
I think the show definitely does a good job of using
Who's in that? Who?
using sort of, well, especially the music, but using traditional writing conventions. But it does it well. Like I don't want that to come off as a criticism of like, oh, it's predictable or boring.
Right.
I think it uses writing conventions like beginning and ending with similar lines in a very good way. It proves why those conventions are common, because when they're done right, they work really well. So as far as the writing goes, I also want to say, as far as the characters, I love how petty most of the characters are and how petty their problems. Specifically, you see this, the easiest way is with the Celestes.
Oh, yeah.
The two Celeste characters are so, their problems are so minimal. But I love that because you're taking the snapshot of real people who have real
lives.
Real lives, yeah. And they're not necessarily difficult lives, but they are real lives. And even if, I mean, I'm sure most people can relate to this, that even their friends that have easy lives will have some kind of problem going on at any given time. Even if it's the most petty excuse for a problem ever. So that's kind of, I actually enjoy that, although I think some people probably, I don't know specifically, but I feel like some people probably see that as a negative.
Well, I guess going back to where you saw as a positive that the characters were static, I think the reason I have such an issue with the beginning of Act 2 is because it doesn't differentiate between those static characters when you move into like the modern day museum setting. Like all these people are so nostalgic for the art that preceded it, and they're like, "Oh, all this modern art is just awful," and
Bring it together.
yeah, they're trying to have like a personal renaissance for themselves, but there's like no minor character development to make that static part stand out. I wouldn't necessarily call it a negative that like the characters are like static for that reason,
right,
with the context of it like being contained within the painting. But I think if it was written in a way where the museum characters actually did
show some progression.
Yeah, then you could kind of see that come to life more. I don't know.
And I think I agree with that to an extent. And this is where I come back to the fact that I find the second act somewhat weak overall. I think I get what the writer was going for, and I don't disagree with it. I just don't know, and I don't really know how it could have been executed better per se, but I think it could have. And specifically with regard to what you were saying, that scene to me is supposed to be speaking to like the pretension of artists, especially in the modern day, of like, oh, I wish we still did real art. Like, I don't know. So I think it tried to get that point across, but it didn't do its potential best.
It did okay, but it didn't pull it off wonderful.
Like it got the message out there, but it didn't do it subtly.
Yeah.
It's kind of ham-fisted.
I feel that the script writing is hard for an audience member to grasp, because I'm gonna disagree with your motion about. I felt when I was watching the show that it was kind of like Blue's Clues. The setting is the painting, and then we would be jumping in and out of the painting, and we'd like jump in the painting, and then we'd see like these characters doing their thing. Then we'd jump out of the painting, and then we'd be back with George and his life, and the way it would it segued off into a lot of different characters in the painting. That it was that their characters weren't really that important. They were just the painting person. And then it would have a little story about them, and then it was very confusing. I thought a lot of it was unnecessary and it dragged out.
Yeah, like I
can't imagine anything when you say jumping into a painting for a story other than Mario 64. Like that's where I keep coming back to. Like
Yahoo!
Yahoo! But no, I think that's a fair.
That's
a fair criticism. Yeah. And again, I think this is where, like, for me, having seen it so many times, I think I got the benefit of repeated viewings to pull some more of that information out. Whereas I don't know if all of it is easy to get on a first viewing. And that may be one of the bigger failings of the show, is that it doesn't give its message quickly enough or efficiently enough to draw in a first-time audience, give them the entire story that it wants to give, and then put a nice little bow on it by the end and have everyone leave getting it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say, like, going back again, like, it's a similar failing. They do so well opening up all the characters in the painting, but then when it shifts to Act 2, you don't have that immediate, like, grasp of character. So, again, it's just Act 2.
Yeah, I think Act 2, I think we can all agree Act 2 is definitely not as strong as Act 1
For sure.
in that regard. But I think overall, the writing, I really liked what you said a little bit ago about the writing being really good moment to moment.
Yeah.
I think that made it flow really well, but overall, I feel like it would be very hard to grasp if you didn't know anything going into it. Just watching it one time and then letting that steep inside your kettle for a while.
And that's something important to theater. I know we're trying to move on to the next section a little bit, but I think it's important to note that as far as theater goes, if a show isn't able to get its message across well the first time,
it's not written well.
It's not doing its best, because you can't expect an audience to come back multiple times to a live performance of a show the same way you can expect people to watch a movie multiple times or read a book a couple times.
Right.
They don't have constant access to it.
Yeah. Broadway's expensive.
Yeah. Speaking of Broadway, you guys, we're going to move to the tech aspect of this show. Now, for those listening, we, as a university, actually used the original Broadway set.
I love this because our lighting / stage designer, Bill, he, for whatever reason, like 10, 15 years ago, just bought the original Broadway set because it was touring near where our university is, and they were finishing the tour and getting rid of it. And he just threw it in storage until like a decade or so later, when he was talking to the professor who ended up directing it, and said, yeah, let's do Sunday in the Park with George. I have the set, and they did it.
And it was kind of an honor working on a set where, you know, Bernadette Peters and
Mandy
Patinkin and all of these Broadway greats actually were using, and
Yeah.
we didn't have to do a lot technically.
We had to resize it. I know it was a little bit awkward to look at, not because it was bad, but we had to resize it slightly because our stage was smaller than it was built for. So some of the transitions and some of the, because it basically what it was it was set up in like 4 or 5 something like that wings that progressively moved in.
That looked like a frame.
Right, and created a frame effect, and were all painted in the Syrah style to create an effect of the actual painting. Right.
That's the next section.
There were
And-
so many flies.
Oh yeah, there was.
That was my job. I was one of, I think, 2 or 3.
How many flies did we have for that show?
There were at least 3 people on flies. I can't
You
remember
get
because we had like
ripped?
multiple trees. We had the curtain in and out. I don't remember all of it. We had several though, because I know we had Josh, my roommate, was head of fly crew. I was on there, and then actually, fun, cute story. I met my girlfriend because the first day of rehearsal, she was thrown onto fly rail temporarily because Kyle, the other fly guy, was not there at the time. He was like sick or something, and that was it. The first time we met. But anyway,
That's
that aside, tech.
That's why you like Sunday. George.
That's what all that was leading to.
The only reason. So I guess I can start again because I have a lot of thoughts on the tech of this show.
Yeah. Let's kind of take 2 steps away from what we did
Yeah,
and kind of talk about what could
B.
be done with
Right.
this
Be
show.
done other places.
Yeah,
So-
done other places.
so-
They weren't as lucky as we
Yeah.
did when we got to work with the actual Broadway set.
So just reading the script and seeing the tech directions, I love the potential for tech in this show. There's a number of reasons. Number one, it's like I said before, it's framed through this painting. So you have an art style set up. The costuming for the first act is pretty basic because it's whatever is in the painting. I mean, any production that's worth its salt, the characters are going to be dressed fairly similarly because they need to look like the painting. But as far as lighting and technical like set design go, I love the potential for. We did a lot of flies, but I know right now recent versions have used projections because George will change the environment. He'll take a tree away. That's one of the first things he does in the show is he's like, I don't like that tree. And it goes away because he doesn't like it. And so he's affecting the environment around him. And then he wants more sailboats. So more sailboats come in and just all these little things that are really, there's a lot of really cool ways you can handle that tech-wise to make it beautiful.
Well, I was going to ask what you think might be either like lost in translation from like physical flies to projections, or what could be gained in that.
Yeah. So
I think musically, and this is kind of mixing tech and music together, but whenever he does a single change to any of the set pieces, like that tree, for example, you hear the ba-da-da-da-dum as that goes out. And that's kind of a butterfly-y effect. And like, whoa, that tree just flew out of there. That was really cute. That was really pretty. And I think that's why that music was written that way, because in the 80s, they wouldn't have probably thought to use projections
right.
with this show anyway. So Sondheim was probably thinking, they're going to fly these things out.
Right.
They would have to fly them out. And using just a projector, it kind of blurring in or blurring out or however you want to think about it, it would be I don't think would have the same effect, at least in my opinion.
And I think one of the reasons, so specifically, just to keep on that tree for a second, because I think it's a good demonstration of this point, I think it has a potential benefit and a potential negative that are essentially the same thing. For our version with the tree has a very physical presence when you use a fly. It's forward on stage, you can tell it's physically there, and I haven't seen this done with projections, so I don't know how effective they are at the depth part, but if you're having to project it, say, on the back wall, it's going to feel a little different than if you're getting rid of it in the foreground the way we did. Now, the advantage to the projection is if you're creative with it and you have time to build the projection well the way you want, instead of just having it fly magically out of there, you could have it like
erased.
Yeah,
dissolve.
you could literally, or dissolve. Yeah, you could have it literally kind of be erased from the screen and then that filled back in as though he were literally erasing it from existence. And so I definitely see why projections are tempting for a modern use because it's probably easier overall with modern technology to get done. But I think there's something about physical flies that's really cool.
And it's something you could definitely do with that erasing thing. I just thought sound-wise. When you hear that music and you see that it's being erased, kind of have that really classic eraser sound very briskly in there. It would make it would just make it sound and look a lot prettier. I think that would I kind of make up for the fact that we're not seeing a physical tree flying out of the...
I remembered another fly. It was the actual painting itself.
Yeah.
Which is so cool on a scrim, so you can see through it, but you can also see the painting.
It's massive.
And the other advantage, actually, to the projections, now that I'm thinking about it, is that the painting is supposed to get more and more complete over time. And that's a little difficult to do on a more limited budget with the show. I think we had 2 versions of it, one that was part complete and one that was complete.
Right.
But with projections, if you're projecting the painting onto that scrim, I don't know exactly how that would work. I haven't done a ton of projection work in tech, but if you were, you could theoretically add to that steadily. Although I'm still not sure because you might end up with a weird shadow problem with George behind it on his ladder. So I don't know if that would even work to begin with, but...
I feel like if you're going to do projections, you'd have to almost like have a whole like part of it devoted to like designing your own animations because this can't be like PowerPoint.
Oh my god!
Like crossfading and all that.
I
like,
mean, if you're doing a lower budget version, I would say you could probably just have it fade out and do some really simple ones. But yeah, for a Broadway version, I think they just did one with Jake Gyllenhaal last year.
Oh, his voice.
I listened to the version. I liked that one a lot.
So good.
But so I think for a Broadway production, especially, Chris, I think you have a good point because just you'd want to spend some of that budget on creating custom little animations for that.
Yeah.
Sunday in the Park with George is an interesting show because
Hi, I'm Kellyanne, and this is my speech for my Speech 101 class. Sorry, Kelly.
Letter prompt, okay?
I'm sorry.
Cool it.
We all know you don't like the show, Kellyanne. Gosh.
Carry on.
Well, we're talking about the tech and specifically the set, and it's interesting how creative you can be with the set, even though, like it says in the script, you're like, okay, well, this is the famous painting. You need to recreate this famous painting, so it needs to look like this painting, but you have a lot of creativity, whether you use flies or in like the acting people, if everyone on stage is a person or you draw in characters, there's a lot of creativity that you can use to show this set, and that's really cool because it is specific, but you can mess around with it.
Yeah, it's one of those shows where you really need a really great technical creative team to work together on, because if you have like a single guy who's doing tech and that's it.
You're
like,
not going to get this stuff.
Poor Bob over here is going to have the absolute worst time trying to design this show because the director's going to be like, we needed a tree. I was working on the painting.
Yeah.
What's your damage?
And I think Kellyanne has a really good point with the giving a starting framework of Seurat's work. Because I know other things too. Like there's a moment in the first act where there's some boys bathing in the water, and there's like a whole little bit with that, and that references directly another painting Seurat did, and I can't remember the title of that one, but it literally, with the original Broadway set that we had, there's a physical box on wheels that is set up to be that, and Sam actually got to sit in
I got to sit. I can't remember the actress's name who actually sat on it, but God help me, I will remember because I got to sit in the same spot she did and it smelled like Broadway, I can tell you.
Is that a
I
good
don't
thing
know
or a
what
bad
that
thing?
smells
Yeah.
like.
It smells like freedom and happiness, Kellyanne.
Anyway,
But I would just set my hand right here,
Sounds like
right
guy from South Dakota.
right on my. I just like set my hand on my cheek, and all I did was just like big old breath, and I was like, somebody famous sat here.
and then
That's so weird.
But so that one, and there's a couple other moments that directly reference his art. So I think that's a really cool thing. And then in the second act, as far as it's weak script wise, I think it actually is cool technically because you have some really awesome technical moments. Chromolum, that's actually why I grabbed the book from you, because I couldn't remember the name of the contraption.
We actually have the libretto. Our musical director over at our university had the libretto on him, and so I was like, "Do you mind if we borrow this for a little podcast we're
And
doing?"
we've been
They're like,
passing it around the table.
"Yeah, we've been passing it around to take notes and reread some stuff." So,
But so the Chromolum's cool because you can do stuff with that. I don't remember how much description is directly given about it, but I think it's just supposed to be utilize sculpture and light.
audience.
But so while Sam's finding that, there's also a moment where the power goes out because it has to include electricity, and the way we lit that, I loved it. It was one of those simple lighting things that was so cool. We just turned all the lights off, and all of the characters literally went and grabbed flashlights and acted as though the power was out.
It was really cool.
It was one of those things that, like, when you're in theater and you get to the point where you're doing so much with lights and so many things, you forget that something as simple as literally just turning the lights off can be so effective.
Right, and the I just found a thing that describes what the Chromolum number 7 is the machine is postmodern in design and is dominated by a 4-foot in diameter sphere. At the top, it glows in a range of cool colored lights. And then it goes to describe. So you really have a real creative liberty, I think, to make whatever you want. The
Absolutely.
And I don't think we even did a sphere.
We totally
ours,
did.
Ours was just some wavy, like,
Modern
rebar
art.
and, yeah,
Modern art bullshit.
It was cool. I liked it.
I loved it.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
it's going back to script, but Stephen Sondheim.
Stephen Hansheim.
Sorry, Stephen. Okay,
Get
Stephen
out.
Sondheim. His stage directions are absolutely amazing.
Right?
Like the absolute detail he goes in. I always love it when stage direction is put in like that because, the audience is never going to have like that direct reading, but the amount of information and like emotional like adjective work in each of them is just ridiculous. So that was just my little spiel.
Yeah,
And I'm a big proponent of good stage direction because to me there's like multiple levels you experience a show on, and as artists we're fortunate enough to experience it with the script, and I think there can be a vast difference between experiencing the script and just the stage show. And you're right, Sondheim I think adds to that reading of the script a lot.
I really do. I just love Sondheim, man. I just really love Sondheim.
Welcome to the We Love Sondheim podcast.
Welcome to the We Love Sondheim podcast.
Oh my god, Sam's bringing out his D&D character.
Next time on Dungeon Quest.
Anyway. So is it time?
I think we're gonna switch to the music aspect of the show. Now, you guys.
Sondheim. Wait, who wrote the music?
Wait,
All right, you gotta clarify
Wait.
with me. Like,
I couldn't
who
tell,
did
yeah.
the music here?
Who's the music guy?
I'm pretty sure it was Andrew Lloyd Webber, actually.
Wasn't Rodgers and Hammerstein?
It was Leonard Bernstein. Steven,
Rodgers and Hart.
I will
This is Weird Al Yankovic, right?
I will say in how much I love this show musically, it works musically and lyrically and scripturally almost perfectly. Not biblically,
No, that'd be scripturally.
but if you any of these songs, like especially when the song with the Celestes and the
Soldier.
Mademoiselle.
not that one.
Soldier dude.
That's a good one.
I just like that one.
Celeste and
Mademoiselle.
Taking the day
Soldier
on
Boy.
Sunday.
Yeah.
that one.
Soldier Boy.
The day off.
Is it the one with where he sings the dogs? Because I cannot get over how much I love the dogs.
Oh,
The
that-
day off. Yep, that's right. But when especially with that song, it just flows almost seamlessly with the characters going from a scene and then taking the day on Sunday and then going back into another scene, then going back into music, then going back into the scene, and then it just flows almost seamlessly, and that works with every single one of these songs, especially Color and Light and the poor mom's Fading beneath more. No, that's the number 8.
My favorite title.
I can't remember what the
Wait, which part are you talking about again? Like, what's happening in the script?
In the script, it's when it's Act 2, late Act 2, and Children in Art. Is it Children in Art?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's something like that. I know what you're talking about.
So like Marie has this thing where she's just contemplating with George, and then she talks like, I can't remember the exact plot of the whole song, but I just remember she's like, George and her are having this dialogue, and then all of a sudden you just hear this really gorgeous, almost fast-paced music in the background, and then she starts singing, and it's very powerful. I think I was singing her song in Act 1 rather than Act 2.
Yeah.
Children and Art.
I guess I would just say the way Sondheim writes his music, especially with like a little bit of lyrics here and then like a music swell and doing that all the time, it really gives that like manic side to like when you're painting or like trying to create some like physical art.
Putting it together.
You really like, especially with like the dotting style of Georges Seurat or Georges Seurat. The way he would dot all his paintings together, and especially with the but you get that sense where it's like, oh, my mind's here, I'm gonna put this in here. Oh wait, no, now I'm moving over here. I'm gonna move over here. Like it's like the perfect pairing between Sondheim's like lyrical style and like the nature of what the show is about.
And going along with that, as someone who again doesn't know music very well, I adored just all of the musical background. I don't know the terms to put to it, but the singing when it's done correctly is gorgeous. The orchestra fits really well. And specifically to Chris's point, the way it's woven into the story with the characters, it really informs well what's going on. And that constant theme of the dum 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 dum. Plus, just to bring a specific example, finishing the hat is so cool at the beginning because you get the conflict between Dot and George, and specifically George's inability to lay off his work. And he's like, I don't know, the way the music fits there and that manic style Chris was talking about of making the characters sing a whole bunch of stuff, all fast paced. It's, I don't know, it's gorgeous.
And going on like kind of what he said about the fast paced and the dun 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 dun. I think he wrote a lot of this music. You can especially hear it in like one of the first songs with Dot. Well, there are worse things staring at the water on a sun.
Yeah,
I think that's literally the first song of the show.
That is the first. I think it's the first song in the show, and it's very impressive lyrically that he was able to throw all of these lyrics in here and then make it seem like it's while she's singing, he's just doing those little dots with his paintbrush. That dun 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 dun. Well, dun 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 dun. Like you can just feel that one steady pace.
And I think musically, the themes in the music tie well with the themes in the show, which are all built on the themes of the painting. And so it's this really cool confluence of so many different types of art into one.
Yeah. And a reoccurring musical thing that you don't see really in the script or even in any of the soundtracks is the French horn in the pit. Whenever it's a couple interesting, I can't remember exactly. You can hear it most definitely in the very last song after the bling, bum bum.
I know
dum.
exactly what you're talking
about. And that happens throughout the entirety of the show. And I can't remember the exact sometimes legit use of that that tool is, or if it's just musically really really interesting or cool or whatever. But whenever that happened, it brought you back to the world like we are in this world.
Yep.
And I really like that.
Kellyanne is smiling. That's
a devious smile.
I'm gonna say something good, and we're talking about the orchestra.
Ah!
okay.
The orchestra is very important to every show, and especially Sondheim. The orchestra has a heightened sense of responsibility, especially in Sunday in the Park with George, because Sondheim is a musical genius, and his music is just crazy. So the orchestra makes or breaks this show. Absolutely.
From a musical standpoint, I can agree with that.
Yeah, it's this is one of those orchestras that I think you can have a good pit orchestra with any show just by like picking up some people that are in classes or picking up people who have studied the instruments for a while.
Yeah.
But I honestly feel like with this show and to do this show real honest respect, you need to have a stellar orchestra.
Yeah.
Well, and from an outside perspective, lyrically, sonically, the more I listen to the show in preparation for this podcast, the more and more impressed I was with the, I guess, layering of the different instruments and the voices and how that's all put together. And while I don't have the musical vocabulary to definitively say Sondheim is a genius, I believe you when you say that, because just from sheer having listened to it.
And I would say, like, this is both like a positive and a negative, like personally wise, but there's a lot of like almost like pretentious nature throughout the show, which I think is somewhat done purposefully, because like you know how like art critics and like people criticizing their own art, like they have to do it with an air of pretentiousness. Sondheim almost revels in that, like with how like powerhouse each song is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's positive and negative.
Can I just gush for 2 seconds? I really want to gush.
Only two though.
Like not literally 2 seconds, but in preparation for Sunday Act 1 finale, the scene starts with everybody on stage beginning to yell at each other, and you hear in the background like music accompanying it.
Yeah.
But all the characters start yelling at each other and and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and then at the very height of the of this song, it's the song technically hasn't even started yet, and you hear the ba-da-da-da-dun.
Yep.
And then the old lady says, "Remember, George," and then he says, "Order." Everyone turns to him, and this is all scripted. Right. This is all, and he says, "Design." Blum, 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 and everything's just flowing into place. And musically, I'm thinking about it, and I'm just getting goosebumps all over my body, because it's musically, it's just so gorgeous, and it's just a piano at first.
Yeah, I think Sondheim writes in almost every cue, like
Yeah.
So many cues.
It's so great, and then
he writes it in, which is really helpful.
And I think that's.
I need to finish gushing. But what's so fun about this show is that Act 1 ends with all of the actors on stage posing in the painting picture.
Right.
Curtain goes down, lights go off, blah blah blah.
Act 2 starts.
Act 2 starts. They're in the same freaking position, and they stay there for like 5 minutes.
It's hot up here.
and then like out of nowhere you hear, boom. It's hot up here. Bum, bum. It's hot and it's monotonous. Like, I never in my life would have even.
Cat doing "It's hot and it's monotonous" is
hot
stuck.
and it's monotonous.
That's how you know it's in
the way the actress did it in our show is just drilled into my brain.
It's
forever.
really, really great.
But no, and I think what's so cool about that is it's been part of this theme of, and this kind of goes back to the script writing a little bit, but I didn't get to mention it then, that it goes back to this theme of art and George's control of his world and his reality, that started with the audience is told when that tree leaves that we talked about for so long in tech, the audience is told when that happens, this artist has control of this world. You are living in George's world. And the show is living in George's world. And so the end of Act 1 is the full culmination of that.
Right.
But then the start of Act 2 is where that starts to fray a little bit, and you have the actual characters complaining about being stuck in the painting, which I also love.
I find that to be really funny, and I just found that a hunk of music where they're all talking in extreme speed. Like the lyrics go, there are worse things than sweating by a river on a Sunday. There are worse things than sweating by a river when you're sweating in a picture that was painted by a genius, and you know that you're immortal and you'll always be remembered, even if they never see you when you're listening to drivel and you're part of your companion and your causes have been stolen and your body on endurance. And the baby has no diapers and you're touching and we're not, and you're a part of the proportion, and I hate these people. It's just so well written. Those two are like Act 1 finale, Act 2 beginning, Act 2 finale are by far some of my absolute favorite pieces of music and musical theater in anything in my humble opinion.
Very humble.
Very extremely humble. I'm definitely by no means false. So does anybody like final like music things we want to talk about besides gushing? That was.
If you have anything to say other than that is not just
the music is better than the story.
Yeah,
I agree to that, and I'll also say that
the music gets to shine, and that's not always the case.
Right.
Yeah,
and I will say, with the theater I've done, I've noticed that in musicals, if it's more important for the music to be great than the story to be great, but great musicals have both.
Bonnie and Clyde.
And we just did Bonnie and Clyde, and I don't think Sam was a big fan. But
I love the music was fantastic. I will say that music is bumping, but man, there's just no freaking there's no freaking story in that show. Whoa, no characters, no nothing.
Anyway, so and I guess that's just what I would take away from this is that I think yes, the music's stronger than the script. I like the script, but
I like the script as well. I think it has really, really, really fantastic moments.
So I think now
it's weird and confusing and boring.
if no one else is going, if no one else has any music stuff, I think we should do final like sort of closing thought summary, and then I think Sam, we decided we're going to do it. Out of 10 rating?
Yeah, we're going to each give a little rating out of 10 in our own personal opinions. Now, just for the audience's sake, our opinions are just our own opinions. You can love this show, you can hate this show, you can
send all hate mail directed at Sam, please.
I will take that hate mail with pride because this is just our opinions. We're not professionals by any means. We're just musical theater people doing and talking about the thing we really love. So,
and I want to say real quick too, as far as a 10 scale, some people do this in a bullshit way, I think. My 10 scale, if I give something a 5, it means it was fine. Yeah. And I liked it, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was good. It was fine, whatever. If you're the kind of person who gets offended when something you like gets a 5, you may not like my rating system.
Because
in general.
If we give, I think we all probably agree that if we give it like a 1, a 2, or a 3, that means we really didn't like it.
That's
bad. A 4, or 5, or 6 means that it was.
I'm allowed to give it that, right?
Yes, yes. You have every right to give it that. But then the 4, 5, and 6 are the. That was good. I wouldn't go see it again, but it was good. And then the 7, 8, 9, and 10
If you give something a 1, though, I want you to be able to defend that as, like, I wouldn't even make my worst enemy sit through this show.
Yep.
That's a 1. A 2 is, like,
it's
definitely
so
not.
long.
And a 3 is, like, it was boring, but there were parts that were good.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Felt like 3.5.
Like 1 is where you'd buy tickets so that other people can't see it.
One is where you'd like petition to have it taken off Broadway because you hate it that much. So with that said,
we're gonna start over here with Chris on our first rating out of 10.
I'm gonna steal the Anthony Fantano album scale. Give it a light 6 to a strong 7. I'd say I feel the strong 7 just because the music is just so phenomenal. And it ties into, there's, like, leitmotifs of each of the characters you have, like the dotting for George, and just the way it's incorporated lyrically and with all the different dialogue. I think it's just masterful. And I think you do get, like a good sense, like, the artists struggle throughout it, especially with, the painters and the different people. Yeah. But that pretentiousness does wear thin a little bit, and I think that you just lose the only veneer holding it together is that music because it's just so phenomenal by the end of it.
So we've got, you said what, a 6 to a 7?
Yeah,
I'm in the same range. I give it for personal reasons, I give it a 7. As far as recommendations, I'd probably give it a solid 6 for someone who's never seen it before. But personally, it's a 7, and that's because of I don't think the script is as poorly written as I think some people do. I think that it ties really, really well with the music. The music is gorgeous, and the technical elements and the technical aspects to it are really, really great. As far, you know what, I think a better way to put this is I give it a 7 as far as wanting to do it, and a 6 for recommending to go see it.
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Kellyanne is getting
We're gonna
ready.
stall a second.
She did this whole motion where she just put her finger up to her mouth and she was like, I need to prepare my body for this.
I would give Sunday in the Park with George a 2.7
Ooh.
out of 10.
That's harsh.
Very
That's specific.
It is. I was I mean, you can round it up to a 3 if you want, but I don't really know if I was in between like 2, 3, but I didn't really want to give it a 3. I'd give Emo the musical a 3.
The Blue's Clues musical. The reason you didn't really like it is mostly because it felt long and the script was lacking.
Yeah, it was hard for me to follow the story, and I wasn't attached to the characters at all.
Mhm.
Even though that the music is amazing, I felt a disconnect because I'm more of a story person. I want a really good plot.
Right.
And I wish it was at the same level as the music.
That's
and
fair.
for me, it wasn't.
Yeah, and a lot of musicals fall into that pitfall, which you know Frank Wildhorn is known for doing that. I'll bash on
Hey,
him.
he tweeted about our show. You have to be nice to
He
him.
Facebooked
Facebooked
about
Oh
our
yeah,
show.
Facebook. That's
Uh,
whatever.
But
We're
no,
too young
I-
for that.
I yeah.
I did spend forever looking at his Twitter trying to find it and not able to, and then someone's like, yeah, it's on Facebook too.
You dummy.
They
But-
told me Twitter.
Don't listen
Final
to
rating
Okay,
from the
when
MC
Sam
here.
if Sam doesn't die from this cough, he will give
Yeah,
a rating.
Sam, what's
Okay,
your
but-
rating? And then what's the average rating?
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Ben, do the math. But my overall rating, I give this an 8.5. And I don't give shows like I don't give a lot of shows stellar ratings often. But I think the music and the lyrics and the script flow so beautifully in and out of each other. It kind of makes up for the lack of plot in Act 2. And I every time I hear some of these songs, I start bawling just because they're just so powerful and yet so simple. I really like George's character. I shouldn't because he's pretentious and dumb but he really is, in my opinion, a good character, and he's one of those roles that I wish and hope to play one day. So I'd give it an 8.
I did the math on an 8.5.
Cool, 8.5.
So the ratings I used Chris. I gave a 6.5 because he said 6 to a 7.
You're gonna ruin
Right.
a median.
You're welcome.
I used myself as a 7. I used Kellyanne as a 2.7 and Sam as an 8.5. So that comes out to a total average of 6.175.
That's still better than 5.
That's
out of
7.5.
10.
Yeah.
So it's an above average, according to the 4 random people we have assembled for this podcast. It is an above average musical.
And
So, internet, you can take that as a definitive stamp of approval.
And we're
That
not
is
going to
official.
put the number in the description, otherwise you wouldn't watch the whole thing.
We're the
so-
governing body
gonna force you to
of
watch the whole
musicals, therefore we have authority on
It's
this.
listen. There's nothing to watch.
Hey, listen, guys. I just want to take 2 seconds to say that your opinions don't matter. Clearly, no. We're just a bunch of rando people talking about shows. So don't take our opinions too heavily. That's just what we think. If you agree, put something in that comment box. Or
If you don't agree, put something.
if you don't agree, just don't make it hurtful. I'm very sensitive.
Stephen
Just-
Sondheim is a lyrical hack, and he does not deserve to.
He
Oh,
doesn't.
gosh.
He doesn't write
Oh,
any of his
gosh.
own music. He didn't even write Phantom of the Opera.
If you
Jeez.
guys want to send some hate mail, if you guys want to leave some really insulting comments, go ahead and aim that at Sam.
You can also put it in the complaint deposit box. But guess what? I don't check that shit.
Wow, that was
Woo!
really
That was
passionate.
aggressive. All right.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
think that's
That ends our wrap for today on this podcast. We talked about Sunday in the Park with George. Next week we will be talking about.
A different musical.
We're going to be talking about Newsies
oh boy.
next week. So we might not have the same group of people here next week.
So now is the time to seize the
We're
day.
moving on.
But now is the time to
We're
seize
moving
the day.
on to the House of Mouse.
But we're going to be doing Newsies next week. So
All hail our entertainment overlords.
join us next week, and
Thanks for coming.
fellow theater people, live long and play on.